agenda work, but we want to thank you for coming here tonight to our Board of Education meeting. And what's always the highlight of our day is when we get to recognize our students. And today we have the honor of being able to recognize the wonderful leadership coming out of Badger Ridge in the form of our student leaders. And leading that presentation will be Dr. Larry Love. Come on to the stage.
Welcome. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yes, of course, of course. So actually, I'm not going to lead it because the focus today is on student leaders. So I'm actually going to call up several of our student leaders who are going to talk a bit about their different organizations, the things that they do, and how they exemplify leadership at Badger Ridge. So if Ashley, Oliver, Matthew, Jessica, Talia, Justin, and Alex could come up. You can just all kind of huddle around in this area. And y'all didn't give me a time limit yet, so.
With the kids, there's no time.
Yeah,
You're good. You just keep going.
So how we're gonna do this, some of their teachers or affinity group or club advisors share a brief message about how they exemplify leadership and why they should be recognized today. So how we're gonna do this is I'm gonna let them talk about their club one by one, and then I'll share what their advisor has shared about them. Or reverse order, I'll share, then they'll share about their club. So first up, we have Ashley, and her advisor wrote the following. I am excited to recommend Ashley Tan for the student leadership role in the AAPI group. Ashley demonstrates exceptional leadership skills and a strong commitment to promoting Asian American culture. As a second generation Asian American, Ashley excels academically and actively participates in AAPI community initiatives. She plays a significant role in our group, inspiring her peers to honor and uphold Asian American traditions. Ashley's dedication to advocating for representation and challenging stereotypes is truly admirable. I firmly believe that her qualities and dedication make her a perfect leader. So Ashley, if you want to talk about what you do in AAPI, we'll start there.
The AAPI group is dedicated to creating a welcoming and inclusive environment for students of Asian and Pacific Islander descent. By organizing cultural events, fostering discussions, and engaging in community outreach, our club aims to promote a sense of belonging and pride in the AAPI heritage. Students are encouraged to embrace and share their cultural backgrounds while learning about the rich diversity within the AAPI community. Additionally, our group seeks to raise awareness and appreciation of AAPI cultures among all students in the school.
What kind of events do you guys have going on or coming up?
Every first Monday of the month, we meet to discuss and taste food from different cultures. And then during Chinese New Year, we have a celebration with dances and performances.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you say the first Monday? Well, I was just going to make sure, the first Monday you do the food tasting. Good for the board to know, just we have the dates.
So next up we have Talia Sprewell, and her advisor wrote the following. Talia shows consistent leadership in our BSU club. She has shown leadership and commitment when it came to putting together the Black History Month events during the entire month of February. She also was the MC for our Black History Month assembly. She helped create ideas for the BSU Spirit Week, assisted with the door decoration evaluations, and just has been an overall true pleasure in our BSU. So, Want to talk about the issue?
The purpose of Badger Ridge Middle School / Cornell's Classroom Union is to help students become leaders for themselves, families, communities, and schools. BSU is to provide a safe space for students to express, learn, debate, and celebrate Black culture. Our mission is to provide activities that will instill community, honor, pride, academic success, and strength.
And what kind of things do you all do in BSU?
Well, every once in a while, like a couple of months, we meet for BSU, and we talk about things that we can do in the future to improve the school and spread Black culture. And as you said, that I was an MC at the assembly, we showed Black culture through several things, including people from colleges who were in sororities and fraternities, and people who just had a successful career in their life.
Oh, all right. Next up, we actually have two students who are representing our Latinx familia. So first, Oliver, who is a 7th grader at Badger Ridge, and his club advisors are actually in the space. And what they had to share was Oliver has been an active member of the Latinx familia for the last 2 years. In that time, we have watched Oliver grow immensely. He has demonstrated his ability to be a role model during group meetings, project organizing, and even most recently, he was a co-representative during a guest speaker event. Oliver's strength and courage to take on this leadership role has been noted and applauded. Additionally, we have Jessica, who is also a 7th grader at Badger Ridge, and has also been a member of the Latinx familia for the last 2 years. Jessica is a dedicated member to the group. She has demonstrated her commitment, by always putting forth effort in each of our group projects, such as the Latinx display case. Jessica has also demonstrated her leadership ability by being a role model to other Latinx familia students and by attending group meetings, maintaining her educational goals, and striving for greatness. So, I want to talk about Latinx community.
The Latinx familia is a group of Badger Ridge Cornell middle school students. In our group, we welcome all students. The main focus of our group is to promote and a positive space for students to collaborate and strive to create learning cultures and come together and freely express themselves, provide support to others and participate in activities that will benefit and educate their fellow classmates, teachers, and the Verona community. Lessons as students are focused on improving the lives of all.
Okay. Actually, we got one more from Latinx familia. Justin. Justin is also a 7th grader at Badger Ridge Middle School and has also been a member for 2 years. Justin always goes above and beyond to make sure that Latinx familia is well represented, whether it is speaking about our community service event or being a lead representative for guest speakers. Justin has demonstrated over and over his leadership to our group, his community, and his school. Justin and Jessica, can y'all talk about the kind of things y'all do in Latinx familia?
What we do is like we get together with either like authors or we do these things that are the things that we're doing right now. It's called a food drive, which we're donating it to a shelter for Verona and all the poor people. And we've done it for 2 years straight and it ends on April.
People that have a good grade and like that's an like that.
Thank you. Then our last student group is Student Council, and we have 2 members from that organization, Matthew and Alex, and their advisors have the following to say about them. Matthew Larson is another strong leader in Student Council. Despite having moved away for a year, Matthew was voted in as 8th grade co-president. Matthew is an especially strong leader throughout his classes and serves as a great role model to many. He is a strong voice for his peers and has brought up many concerns along with solutions presented. Matthew has been an active member through volunteering his time and helping lead and work as student council accomplishes. Alex Tim is a strong leader in student council. He has been a member for 3 years and now serves as our 8th grade co-president. He has shown exceptional leadership in spearheading our advocacy committee and the mission of improving our school lunches. Alex's original statement made a school board meeting back in 2022 sparked the interest of multiple board members, resulting in the development of our committee, which then presented to the board again in 2023. Alex led the research and data collection that we brought to that board meeting. This even caught the attention of our local newspaper, in which the issue was reported on. Alex continued to work hard as we met with Mr. Weezy and our food services team. I'm proud of the work Alex has put into this cause. Don't talk about student council.
Student Council's goal is to help students gain positive leadership skills, be a voice for students across the building, and to create a fun and engaging activities to improve our school community.
And what kind of things do you want to do with the council?
We have set up fundraisers for different events. For example, this year we set up a hot chocolate fundraiser where we sold hot chocolate during lunch. That was to fundraise for the dance kind of thing that we had during the year. We also have various committees that are focused on different things, such as one that is trying to make the school more eco-friendly and asking students what they would change about the school if they could make improvements overall.
We just overall want to make it so that students' lives are, it makes it feel like they want to be there and they want to learn and want to grow in their personalities and opportunities. And that's one of our main goals. So we try to just make life as sustainable and enjoyable as possible. But we don't always have the power to do that, but we can do that one step at a time.
Thank you.
Cool. So on behalf of the Board of Education and the district in totality, I would like to recognize you with the certificates that Dr. Lowe is going to hand out to you that are personalized to you, as well as to the group that you're representing. Once we finish the presentation of the flags, if you could follow Ms. Marcy Piper Soderblom, she'll take you out for a formal picture. And parents, if you want to get those extra shots in, just follow Marcy out and they'll get you all situated for our formal photographs. Thank you so much today. And let's give a shout out to our great leaders here for
It's nice to meet so fun.
nobody wants to hear budget.
No, the budget's not a big draw. Maybe we should do it first. Never have anyone show back up.
All right, thanks everyone. We are extremely excited to know that the leadership of the Verona Area School District in the form of our Board of Education will be solid in continuity, and we are extremely excited for the re-election of our 3 dynamic board members. We have Jennifer Murphy, Mary Sher Christensen, and Mr. Corby White. Congratulations to each of you on your re-election, and we are honored to be able to provide you with the oath of office that we hope and desire that each of you will say yes to the oath of office, and that'll be led by Mr. John Porco.
Yeah, so everybody going at once?
I think, why don't we start with Jen? I think we start with me. We don't want people to, fudge the oath here.
All right. Take your hand, please.
Okay.
All right, repeat after me.
I, Jennifer Murphy,
Having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member at Large,
having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member at Large,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Just repeat after me. I, Courtney White, having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member at Large,
having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member at Large,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Madam President. All right. I state your name.
Hi, Mary Christensen.
Having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member, Portion 1, outside cities,
Having been elected or appointed to the office of Verona Area School Board Member, Portion 1, outside cities,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
I swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Congratulations. Very. Let me look ministerial. All right. Again, on behalf of our entire community, we couldn't be more happy to have our three valuable members reelected to their offices. And thank you so much for your continued leadership and support of education and support of me as superintendent and the team. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Next, we are excited to transition to will be a unique social studies monitoring report, because at the same time you will hear a presentation of the curriculum adoption process. Well, that'll be led by our amazing staff, and we also wanted to make sure that we have representation from the committee, some committee members themselves, to talk about in detail the process. This will be in presentation form, and then we will pause and ask for the board to consider the purchase, which we know goes by OE6 past the ramifications for board approval. Yeah, and price tag. So really, we haven't done a resorts policy in this manner before, but we think it's definitely beneficial to get full context. And you've also had the ability, and it's also many of you doing so. Thank you to look at many of the curriculum materials yourselves, and we appreciate you taking a look at those. So I'll turn it over to Amy. And while I know our guests very, very well, and I shouldn't even call them guests because they're the heart of what we do, I'll let her do the honors of presenting.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Clarity. We're honored to be here tonight and really share the important work, which is a culmination of a much larger team that has been doing this work all year, led by our Director of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation, Karen Sachs-Glover, and two of our teacher leaders here tonight. We have AJ Simonini. AJ serves as a curriculum learning specialist here at the high school, a multilingual programs department chair, as well as a social studies teacher. And we have Katie Moore, who's a language, literacy, and equity specialist at Sugar Creek. There were two critical members of our social studies team, and we're excited that they could join us to share their work tonight. So, as Dr. Clarity noted, we are here for our monitoring report for social studies. But as we look at our monitoring report for social studies, we know that we've been in a space of capacity building for the past year with social studies awaiting a curriculum adoption process. And that's really what we've launched into this year, so that will be the bulk of our presentation, which aligns closely with indicator number 1. The second indicator from our monitoring report is to make sure that we have 150 minutes per week of dedicated social studies and science instruction in our K-5 schedules, and that's indicator number 2. You can see the evidence link there, indeed showing that we are meeting that indicator and have maintained fidelity to the number of minutes that we're providing for our students. But the bulk of our time today will be spent back on indicator 1, making a recommendation for curriculum adoption and what capacity building and social studies has looked like this year. Before I hand it over to AJ and to Katie to walk through more specific elements of the process, that it was important for us to ground in where curriculum is situated within our teaching and learning framework. So curriculum is one aspect and one component of the teaching and learning framework, which is how we're defining high quality teaching and learning in the Verona Area School District. This was based on feedback from families, students, and teachers about what does effective instruction look like. Curriculum is really situated within that upper right area around engaging and accessible instruction. We know that curriculum plays a key role there. Curriculum is also how we meet grade level standards and supports much of the work of teacher planning. We know that curriculum can also help teachers, if teachers have really high quality materials to draw from, it can allow them to lean into some of the other elements of the teaching and learning framework, right? Thinking about how they foster agency for students, how they collaborate with their PLCs, etc. So curriculum is an important component of our teaching and learning framework, but it certainly is not all the magic that happens in the classroom. It's one component and it's one tool by which teachers really bring that magic to life. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to AJ to talk more about how we have engaged in this process this year. Am I click for us, Laurie?
You go there.
The dramatic pause, I can't.
Drum roll.
Sit there. Can we go with our packets?
Yep, let's go ahead.
All right.
Carry on.
All right, well, thank you for having myself and Katie here to present on quite a extensive process that we've been going through in social studies since September. As Amy shared, I work up here at the high school in various departments and was honored to be a part of this process and am excited to share the amazing work of the team on our curriculum audit and resource selection process. So we wanted to just bring back to the K-12 curriculum audit process where this all really started back in 2022, where Karen and others worked with department leaders, as well as leaders in the district looking at what was kind of the current state of curriculum throughout our entire district, not just social studies, but all core content areas. And these were some of the questions that were asked of those leaders looking at what were the resources, do the curriculum resources you have meet the needs of all learners, are they standards-based? And all of those core departments went through the same process of identifying and answering these questions. And social studies really emerged as an area of need in our district. And there were many reasons for that, but really one of the biggest ones was looking at coherence and standards-aligned instruction. Much of the materials that were being used were teacher-created, which many are amazing, but we didn't have necessarily the support resources for teachers, and so multilingual teachers and teachers in the TWE program were having to translate resources and spending a great deal of time on that. And so we were really looking at how social studies really rose to the top for our core content areas as needing that review and making sure that we had quality resources for our teachers and our students in the classroom. And so after social studies was selected as that first content area to go through this renewal process, we asked for feedback from those in the classroom. What do you need from a quality social studies curriculum? And some of the things that came up were, we want to make sure we have standards aligned curriculum. We want to make sure that our curriculum is meets the needs of our diverse learners, our multilingual learners, as well as making sure that the resources that we have tell multiple perspectives of historical events, so that we had those balanced lessons and made sure that there was representation of all different groups in the resources that we are using in the classroom. And so throughout the entire process, we were dedicated to the commitments that our district has set as far as disciplinary literacy, our strategic priorities, looking at inclusive teaching and learning, and also making sure that with whatever curriculum was selected, that we supported teachers with the implementation. As a teacher myself, it's one thing to be handed a resource and here you go. It's another to actually get that training on how do I implement this in the classroom. And so Amy will be talking a bit more about that later as well as connected to our commitments. And really starting every meeting and grounding ourselves that the biggest piece here is making sure that every student, no matter what school, no matter what area of our district, has access to those grade level standards in their classroom. And that really guided our work as we were reviewing and looking at the different resources that were available to support social studies instruction. And so just a little bit about this team that I keep referring to. So we had a team of 30 different members of the Verona Area School District staff. Those members range from K through 12 teachers. We had curriculum and learning specialists, administrators, leaders in specialized programming, multilingual programming, and special education. And this really provided a really well-rounded approach where we could all learn from each other. We worked in teams of not just grade-alike staff. We worked in teams to see a full picture of social studies instruction in our entire district. And so learning from those different perspectives really helped ground us in this work. And we met 10 different times from September to February. So it was a significant time commitment, but the work was very important for all of those members on the team. And we really enjoyed being together and working through making sure that whatever selection was made was best for kids. And so I will hand it off to Katie to talk a little bit more about our process.
Thanks, AJ, and thank you to everyone for having me here today. It was really a wonderful team to be a part of and a really special process to be a part of. So up on the screen, you'll see the process schedule that we engaged in during our time and the sequencing of our work. The team spent a good amount of time just grounding ourselves in building up the criteria that we needed and reviewing resources. And then come November, we began our resource review. And then following that, we got to our final recommendations and at the end of February. And review process. So as for the review process, the team built out criteria after examining some of our own internal commitments to equity. We saw standards-based as a primary driver of this teacher feedback. So grounding ourselves in state standards, the detailed language acquisition standards were extremely critical and important parts of this process. But once the criteria was determined, we put together several versions of the evaluation tool before landing on one that accurately represented what we were actually looking for. Our rubric had 19 components, with some of the areas here as highlights. And you'll notice there's the student learning experience, the standard alignment, and making sure identities of all learners and connecting their learning to their own identities were really critical within that work. After reviewing resources, we will look for clear, some, and no evidence within those curriculum materials and resources. And you'll also notice that there's a photo here of our team cadet work through that. After careful review of resources, we narrowed down our selections to top two resources at the K-5 and at the 6th through 9th grade levels. And then we invited vendors to come and answer further questions from our team. We asked everything from how do they approach Spanish translation to how much prep time is required of the teacher's materials given. And following those sessions, we came to the conclusion and submitted final feedback on what we felt was the best resource for our team. So after careful consideration of our criteria and ongoing engagement with the vendor, the final recommendation for the K-5 resource adoption is TCM, teacher created materials. There was strong evidence of standards alignment, as well as integration of language arts standards. So with our commitment to disciplinary literacy, we felt this was really important factor. Additionally, being able to provide support and work in Spanish for our SWEET program and resources of that investment to meet those unique needs of the program. And while TCM offers K-3 materials in Spanish, they did not have anything developed at the 4th to 5th grade level, but in collaboration with them, they have worked and agreed to make specific units in 4th and 5th grade to work with our program and our bilingual unit frameworks that are already in development. So feedback from the committee was overwhelmingly positive in support of TCM. And from a teacher standpoint, knowing that our staff especially our like K-5 staff and the 6-8 staff are going to be adapting 2 curriculum for next school year, that this resource is really comprehensive. It provides student workbooks, other teaching materials, so the amount of prep time is lessened and not as necessary in the teacher planning piece of it. It allows for teachers to focus on standards alignment and adjusting lessons to meet the specific needs of the learners in the classroom and monitoring student progress rather than investing all of the time in completing materials. The quote on the right here is the quote that we shared at the beginning when we came through some of the needs that were requested from teachers around social studies curriculum. That is current resources that tell multiple perspectives on historical events. So we can teach them that show multiple perspectives. And here are areas of clear evidence from our rubric that TCM those needs. If we look specifically at the second, third, and fourth bullet points, those resources really seem to meet the needs of our staff and our district and our students.
So I will talk a little bit about then the 6 through 9 recommendation. We went through the same process that Katie went over for our 6 through 9 materials. You might be wondering why 6 through 9 and not 6 through 8 or 6 through 12. In 9th grade, all students are required to take U.S. history. They are also required to take U.S. history in 8th grade, so it's split. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever curricular resources were selected were best for that transition and coherent. So that you didn't have a student moving to a different type of resource or a different type of platform, moving already in that transition that there's a lot of changes, right? And so that's why we went with the 6-9 approach at the secondary level. And so our teams that looked at the various resources ultimately landed on recommending our National Geographic curricular resources for our 6 through 9 classes. Similar to what Katie shared about the K-5 resources, they have identified clear standards, were aligned to standards. The resources were available in Spanish, and that was extremely important, especially at the middle school level where social studies is part of the two-way immersion program. And so we really wanted to make sure that whatever resource was selected at that secondary level met the needs of our amazing two-way immersion program. As I also said, it provided support for that vertical alignment, especially that 8th to 9th grade transition, as well as these resources really were inclusive of all identities and cultures. There was clear evidence of that in our review. And so, again, some of the points of clear evidence that came from the rubric for the National Geographic resources included that standards-based alignment, included diverse representation, that piece connected to two-way immersion, and that these resources are available in Spanish, not just to support FLE, but also our newcomers, our multilingual learners who are arriving in our district. And also provided opportunities for students to apply a critical lens to the past, not providing the answers, right, but allowing students to think critically about some of those events and things that have happened, and allowing them to come to their conclusion of what had happened in history. And so I'll turn it over to Amy, who will talk a little bit about some of the different representation that is in these resources.
Okay. Hopefully you've heard some themes here. We needed it to be standards-based, we needed it to have multiple perspectives, and we needed students to be able to see themselves represented within the curriculum. And so while we had this representation was a really critical element of our rubric, we wanted to make sure that we continued to call out and name some examples of where we found that representation within our text. Specifically knowing Governor Evers signed Bill 232 around Asian American history recently. We as a board have made that commitment, and as a district have made that commitment to AEPI representation earlier in the year. And so here, while this is not at all encompassing or fully comprehensive, we just wanted to give a little sample of some of the information and some of the stories that are told within this is specifically the National Geographic text at 8th and 9th. But you can see many different diverse identities represented here, as well as the team was keen to think about areas where we were providing multiple narratives and not just telling a single story about any one population or any one group. And so everything from celebrating and talking about the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance to the Asian American Civil Rights and celebrating the Americans with Disabilities Act. These are all components of this text and ways that the team found diverse representation really highlighted here. In the elementary text as well, a few resources, and I know we also have several different books that we brought, but naming on the left here, you see components of the curriculum talking about and celebrating Hmong culture with the Hmong New Year. Also elements in a task here that lifts up our primary source document. This is the Chinese Exclusion Act, in which students are asked to understand that act through the lens of immigration and that immigration process. So at all levels, making sure that our students have access to and are being exposed to those windows and doors that I think we heard from even our Badger Ridge students that were here earlier today as being so critical to what we can provide our students and the importance of that within instruction. And then just to name that while we looked at 8 different curricula, we talked to 4 different vendors, we also recognized that there was not going to be one perfect curriculum for the Verona Area School District. And this is where it comes back to the brilliance of our educators, and our educators really engaging in our professional learning communities. That has been a really critical strategy for us this year. And part of that work in the PLCs is these cycles of inquiry. Adopting a new curriculum for social studies doesn't change the necessity of diving into the cycle of inquiry. Our staff still engaging with the standards and making sure that the standards and the tasks are really reflective of the specific needs and identities of their students in their classroom. So part of our professional learning plan for teachers will continue to focus on understanding how do we engage in the cycle of inquiry and bring that equity lens to a newly adopted curriculum. So with that, we've begun mapping out some of our professional learning, knowing that we indeed want to support our educators to make meaning of this new resource. We have some options over the summer that teachers can come and engage with the vendor and engage with each other and get a jump start on some of their planning. Additionally, we've built into our welcome back teacher PD days at the beginning of the year, some curriculum sessions, as well as some grade level sessions across the district. One of our goals here was coherence. So first grade teachers all getting to look at all of their similar units together would be a really powerful experience. And finally, providing ongoing support So through our Late Start Mondays, through our professional learning communities, and through Role-alike, pulling all of our teachers together in this process was part of why it felt so powerful. Having K-12 social studies educators was really powerful experience, and being able to continue that through a role-like structure will be another way that we further support the capacity building to really bring this, bring the adaptive curriculum to life. So in summary, we have been working on the monitoring report, talks about building capacity, and this team really invested lots of time this year in making this recommendation, making the curriculum review and recommendation today for this adoption. We know we'll continue to need to center our Wisconsin standards for social studies and have a robust implementation process that goes along with any curriculum implementation that is to come. So thank you. This will open it up for any questions that you may have. John?
This is not a question.
Sure.
I would have liked to spend all night looking through the resources over there because I have a deep affinity for history and love it. But I also I don't think I heard the word primary source until I was in college or getting a master's degree. It's just not how we learn history, you know. It was very rudimentary, learning dates and some sort of continuity that way. To be able to put primary sources in front of our students and start by asking what they think about it, you know, in an age where all information is becoming increasingly suspect and they're gonna have to move past secondary sources and identify primary sources to see the actual document that not only says, we're going to refuse to admit Chinese people in this country, but here's why, you know. So to see that is important, you know. We have all these debates in our country, and it's because people don't have to look at the primary documents, you know, to see that the people that founded the Confederate States said, this is why we are fighting. You know, we want to continue slavery. That's why we're concerned about states' rights. You see that primary document. And then ask them to interpret it and think critically about it. It's just such a powerful tool. And so I gotta say, I just love this whole presentation. I love how it opens up avenues for our students to think differently about things and assemble narratives about our history that matter to them. So yeah, this is really cool. And I love the whole process with, you know, getting everybody involved and looking at it. Obviously I am full of opinions about history. I'm really glad that I was not a part of this process. We do not want those opinions, but I trust wholeheartedly that all the people in the room were very thoughtful. This looks really good. So I'm really, really impressed. And also I love pictures. So, you know, the dry, dusty history textbooks that I got and never read because I didn't care in high school that much, not as remotely good as just putting these pictures out there. So I'm super, super happy.
Thanks, John. It's exciting too, right? When we looked at the platforms, the digital platforms that each of the texts have, they're very engaging text to speech. They can be read to you, right? It creates PowerPoint slides or Google slides and seamlessly integrates with Canvas, which really allows our teachers to go deep with the content and not spend time formatting slides to make that happen.
That's something else I want to say. If anybody's listening at home, not all of these curriculums lend themselves to multimodality. So the ability for students to engage with material reading, writing, listening, speaking, through all those modes of communication is so powerful because we know through decades of research at this point that effective education requires multimodal approaches. And just to have that built in, and then obviously with the dual language components as well, it's just, yeah, they just didn't make curriculums like this when I was growing up. They absolutely did not.
One thing that is very evident, and if you attend, I know you have, attend any of the African American History Academic Challenges done by us, by the 100 Black Men of Madison, you can see the excitement from students learning something that's not in the traditional textbook, that they're learning from other sources. And proof of that, yeah, part of it's the competition, the competitive nature of it, but the other part of it, they are retaining information that's new to them, and they're excited to learn that. So this is going right along with that, introducing a new way, a new text for students to be excited about.
I have a couple of just questions. So one kind of piggybacks off of just a few things that I was just hearing you all talk about. So remember, I have done math curriculum adoption. And yes, there's the concept that math never changes. I get that. However, with social studies, I'm wondering, like some of the state standards talk about civic engagement or like the behavioral sciences, sociology. I'm wondering, are there any aspects of this curriculum that still stays dynamic and current, so to speak? Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like some of these standards lend themselves to current events. And if that's like the flexibility you're talking about with educators making their own decisions in the moment, but how does like a set social studies curriculum also live in the moment because we are living social studies? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's where keep putting this same slide back up and you'll see it again in science, but that's why the work of our PLCs is so critical, right? The courses, I think it goes 1877 to present, that's a whole lot that's happening, and there's a whole lot that's happening in the present.
Yeah.
And so how do we help our educators think about, where do I use this resource and still everything I know about strong pedagogy to make sure that I can make some curriculum alignment here, but also stay really relevant to what students are engaging with in terms of the tasks that they're given. And I know that the US history teachers have thought deeply about how do we use this text and what's here as a jumping off point to go deeper into. We'd never be able to cover all of these things with the depth that we would like. But what are the things that feel most important to our students that we do want to spend more time on and make some more really, really important connections to?
It's one really just to note about the U.S. history curriculum is the resource does an amazing job of connecting historical events to more present day. So like, for example, car culture. My students would be very proud that I'm using the word car culture right now. You know, they talk about cars, but actually this text, this resource brings it all the way back to car culture, starting with the first car that was created. And in that same chapter, even though it's in the early 1900s, they have a piece about bringing it to present day as well. And so, although that might not be necessarily a controversial issue, although, you know, BMW versus or whatever else, that might be controversial to some. But it does do a really nice job of connecting the past to present. And I think, as Amy said, as educators, then we're able to also then use the brilliance that we have in order to connect those current, you know, events that are happening. Because as Amy said, no one curriculum has it all, right? But it definitely is a resource that does a really great job with connecting the past to present.
On a technical note, there are new editions coming out, and so that's actually been part of the quote that we have, is to make sure that we get the latest edition, specifically of the 6th and 7th grade text, the new editions coming out next year, and so that we would get the latest edition in print to make sure that it is reflective of the changes that they've made.
And then I think I heard you say in alignment of that throughout the school year with PLC time, that it could be possible, I know it feels big in my mind, but that all 4th grade teachers could potentially have a chance to talk, so we're keeping the same coherence. If a team at Glacier Edge thinks this would be really interesting to augment or add, that we're continuing to have that cross-site dialogue always with any of those kind of dynamic and flexible pieces.
Yeah, our current role structure right now is we've worked closely with Encore elective teachers, so all of the tech ed teachers are getting together, or all of the psychs are getting together. We haven't necessarily done that widespread with core content teachers, like all of grade 4. But that's what we're looking at when we think about next year and having a common curriculum for both ELA and social studies. It really lends itself to those opportunities for coherence across the district, sharing ideas and building a larger PLC, so to speak, through that role-like system. And so that's something that we're exploring both for our welcome back days and throughout the year for our experiments.
I just have one more. Again, from a math frame, anytime we attempted to do a curriculum adoption, you know, it's one thing to look at a curriculum, and it's one thing to actually implement and do. And so I'm curious if there was any piloting or dabbling, was there any sort of classroom testing of any pieces within the scope of this pilot experience, just to see how it felt for a teacher to give something a dry run, to have something in front of students? Was that a part of this at all?
Yes, we did. We had, at the K-5 level, we had our top 2 curriculums tried out with different teachers from our team and give feedback and collect student feedback and experience around that. So it was positive feedback from TCM.
Excellent, thanks, I'm done now. So exciting to talk about this. But thanks for all of your work, thank you, and to your team.
So we kind of have 2 different discussions that we need to have. Are there any other questions from the board about the curriculum adoption process? It's been really interesting to hear everything that you went through. It sounds like a very robust process with a lot of great feedback. So thank you for all of your work and dedication for that, for our students and for our staff. Because teaching high quality materials makes everybody's job better. So thank you. From the board, then there's also the discussion about our monitoring report. Do we have any questions about our monitoring report? I think as we've been in the capacity building phase, we've kind of reached the end of the capacity building phase. So thank you, we can mark that now. We have accomplished the capacity building, but now we still have work then that comes back to the board and to administration about how we adapt our indicators. And so that's something that is a discussion that we'll need to schedule in and work. And I think, as all of this work has been so fruitful, we probably want to let that get a little bit of feet on the ground before we start figuring out how to measure progress. So that's still something that we do as a board have to do. With that, I'm going to jump ahead to board action. Is that okay on this? With that, is there a motion to approve the social studies curriculum as presented?
So.
Motion from John. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Corby. All in favor of approving the social studies curriculum as presented, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? It has been approved as presented. Thank you so much.
Just clarify, you're approving the purchase?
That was the curriculum.
The purchase, yes.
Okay.
I know, I wanted to clarify that too. Everybody knows that was what we were just.
Yes, we're approving, yes. The purchase of the curriculum. The other action that we would have, is there a motion to approve the social studies monitoring report as presented?
So moved.
Motion from Jen, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe. All in favor, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the monitoring report is approved as presented as well. Thank you so much.
Just really quick before you go, and I know it's been a long day, so I'm gonna get you out of here in 30 seconds or less, I promise. I just want to sincerely thank both of you, not just for your presentation today, for your leadership on our committees. And I know it was a broad range of voices and minds in a space really working on that for our students. But also, I want to thank our Board of Education because they allow me as a leader through the agenda to have our student groups come and present. You think about our Latinx student population coming in, our AAPI group, our BSU student, they've all had a clear message about the importance of representation. And I think if they could all say one thing in totality in one way or another, they have made it clear we are not invisible. And this process has brought their work and their representation to the forefront, and it's because of our board centering our equity framework and allowing that to be our way to really, we're able to put committees together, we're able to center student voice through our strategic framework, and we're able to see that not just in our curriculum selection and purchase by our Board of Education, but also through the instructional model that we have, that our students have, that our staff have the ability to elevate and show representation and inclusivity in all their practices. So thank you for that broad range of what this means. It's far more than just this purchase. It's really a life-changing event for each student in the Verona School District through the magic of what happens in the classroom. So thank you. Thank you all. All right, we're going to transition to our science monitoring report. And Meredith gave me the perfect segue, and we didn't practice it at all because you're going to see in our science presentation, while there is a piece of it that is about where we need to place our curriculum work, we're going to begin to see, based off some of our previous discussions around assessment choices in our indicators, of how we can start to look at monitoring reports and actual academic student outcomes through assessments like our board exam and others. So you'll see examples of that today. Do the science monitoring report will also be very transferable to what you will see coming forward in social studies as well. So with that, is Adam joining? Are you going solo? All right.
Here we go.
You need water? You're
No, I'm
good.
good.
All right.
Yeah, let me go. I heard you heard we need a break.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to continue on with science. So we know that science is also in a place of capacity building. Now we've closed up social studies, but science is in a place of capacity building. And what you'll see on this slide really is kind of the key findings around the important elements of the capacity building that we're trying to do. We identified that we need to be really clear with our standards alignment and support with instructional resources. So the work that we've done this year in our leadership moves in 23-24 have involved developing and implementing those PLCs around grade level standards. It's been a coherent strategy district-wide. We've heard about it all year long. But that really is how we're building capacity for our staff to understand those standards and plan around those within the cycles of inquiry. Additionally, another element of our leadership moves this year in supporting science was really developing that teaching and learning framework to identify what is strong instructional practice in the Verona Area School District. What do we expect to see in a science classroom or in any classroom? And then having PLCs make sense of what does that mean in chemistry or what does that mean in 5th grade science has been a really important capacity building. So that's what we've been up to this year in terms of our work on capacity building, right? A lot of work within PLCs on standards and our teaching and learning framework. So there's that graphic again. I think this is time number 3 for the night. We get to see this is indeed what our cycles of inquiry look like. Sounds like a broken record, but this is really critical to the way that we are engaging in this work, articulating proficiency of students and reviewing our student data. Moving forward, as we think about continuing with science and continuing in a space of capacity building, it's important to recognize the changes and the ebbs and flows of our planning over the past few years. So the original plan, as we heard from AJ tonight, was given the urgency of the curriculum audit and providing resources in social studies. Our original plan had us engaging in a social studies adoption process this year, science next year, and language arts in 25-26. With the passing of Act 20, we know that that expedited our timeline for language arts. Our team felt strongly that we still needed to continue with social studies, given the gaps that you heard about earlier, and the lack of coherence and the lack of resources for our staff. And so this year, we've proceeded in 23-24 with both the social studies and the language arts curriculum adoption process. Then still on the docket for next year would be for 24-25 would be to engage in the same robust process with a large team for multiple months reviewing our science resources. Given how much our K-5 staff especially will have on their plate next year with 2 new curriculum adoptions for language arts and for social studies. We'd then also be asking them to engage in this process. We are making the recommendation to revise our plan for next year in that last table on the right there, to focus most specifically on secondary science next year and move elementary science to the following. Our secondary staff are typically single subject teachers. So they're not, even though in middle school we're adopting a 6-8 ELA curriculum or language arts curriculum and social studies, very few teachers would actually be doing both. Right? They might just be doing social studies. And those would be different than our science teachers who could engage in this process. At the secondary level, we currently have 2 different curricula for our monolingual classrooms and our TWE classrooms. So there's an opportunity for us to build coherence here and have some consistent resources across programming. So our secondary staff are still feeling the urgency to move forward with the curriculum adoption as scheduled for next year for science. Again, given the amount of time that our elementary staff, K-5 specifically, will need to invest in that social studies and language arts adoption, and to really get to know those resources, engage in that PLC process and implement them with fidelity, it's our recommendation that we give them they'd actually have 2 full years to do that. So we would adopt in 25-26 for implementation in 26-27 at the elementary level. So that's from our revised plan based on what we're learning, what the educator feedback is, and what we're seeing in terms of what's feasible with the professional learning time and collaboration time that we have. So we would continue in terms of our desired state with capacity building. We continue to map curriculum K-12 while secondary engaged in an adoption process. Elementary would still continue planning around science. It's not going away. We do have a resource at the elementary that we are using in science. So it's not as if there's nothing. Right? We do have an elementary resource that's being used across all of our sites. And our students will continue with that next year while we continue this capacity building around standards, and the secondary staff are reviewing secondary science curricula along the way. It would look a little bit like this. Quarter one, we would assemble a team still, K-12, to dive deeply into those standards and look at the curriculum mapping and the vertical articulation. We heard loud and clear from our social studies team members how powerful that was. So we would still bring that team together at the beginning of the year to launch that process. And after quarter one, we would shift to focus most specifically on secondary curriculum adoption. At this time next year, we'd look to make a recommendation for secondary science adoption. The following year, we'd be implementing secondary science curriculum in 25-26, and then elementary would launch into their process, and ensuring that K-12 alignment with the implementation of elementary science in 26-27.
Is it okay if I ask a question right on that slide?
Yeah.
So can you just re-explain then, if quarter one, the curriculum team is still going to be focused K-12, what does that look like from the K-5 piece, if that's sort of paused, but yet they're part of that initial step? Can you just give a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're thinking it's going to be a very small group of people, perhaps a few coaches or CLSs engaged in a process that would be mostly in the evening. So maybe 1 or 2 meetings for us just to have that perspective and think through the vertical articulation.
Got it.
So they have a seat at the table.
So their voice is sort of brought through to the secondary perspective to keep in mind. Okay.
So that we can make sure that whatever secondary is adopting, they've heard the elementary voice.
Got it.
They understand what the elementary resource currently is, knowing it could change, but they have that lens reflected. And we've maintained fidelity to that K-12 mapping. You heard coherence over and over again. We don't want to do anything that would jeopardize our ability to be coherent. And so this was kind of the compromise or navigation we found to have those voices represented.
That's super helpful.
And then this is the data that Dr. Clarity was referring to. If we do shift to a space of looking at the forward exam does test for science in 4th and 8th grade. It's also part of the pre-ACT, which we now do in 9th and 10th. So the data you see here is comparing 21-22 in 4th grade to 22-23. Green bars are the percent of students who are proficient or advanced, demonstrating their mastery of the science standards. So for 4th grade, you can see 65.6 and 65.3. Again, these aren't the same cohort, different groups of students, but pretty stable there. At 8th grade, the next 2 bars, you see 21-22 are at 48%, 22-23 are 8th grade students who are at 51%. So there has been an increase there in terms of 8th grade student proficiency. We took a pre-ACT at 9th and 10th grade last year for the first time, so we don't have that comparative data. Actually just took it again last Thursday. So in the future, we will be able to continue to monitor, use the pre-ACT data at the school level to monitor how our students are doing in reflecting on those specific science standards. So while we're capacity building at the elementary level and working through this curriculum adoption process at the secondary level, we will have forward assessment data from the end of the year in pre-ACT to continue to keep an eye on how students are performing in relation to those grade level standards and how we can hold ourselves accountable to being more importantly. Our capacity building is really supporting students. So our leadership moves, to wrap up our science portion here, really we want to continue building capacity with those K-12 standards and that vertical articulation. We'd like to adjust our timelines to be responsive to the different needs of elementary and secondary as we move forward with the curriculum adoption process. And we look forward to potentially using forward science data or pre-ACT assessment data to monitor our student progress along the way. So with that, what questions do you have about science?
I think each time that this comes up, we always say, it's not that we're not teaching science. We have a really robust science curriculum, and I think that's worth, mentioning now for the 3rd year, but it is still relevant. I also appreciate that there is a recognition that the overload of curriculum adoption on staff would be untenable if we continue along with our original timeline. I think it's important that since we do have, the extended timeline, that having some additional monitoring data is appropriate, relevant, and I think what's presented makes sense to be maybe incorporated into an indicator. So that would be something that maybe the board has a thought about. But as far as the process, I appreciate the information, and I think I think the reading curriculum kind of threw a surprise, into some of our best laid plans on curriculum adoption, which we have adapted to.
You said that nicer than I did.
Yes. Yes. Are there any questions from the board about the timeline and the process? Are there any questions from the board about what we can be doing to monitor, knowing this is the situation kind of that we are proceeding in for the next year or two as far as before we get to a new curriculum?
And I appreciate even just having a sample of the board exam data. You know, it is a measure. We've talked about using that as at the board table for other results monitoring. So it gives us a place to just have a current state for our students, and yeah, I think it's super helpful.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be interesting to have a baseline too, especially as we go into an adoption of new curriculum, to see how that, just even the efficacy of that that curriculum. I mean, I'm sure there's a learning curve. It doesn't show up immediately, but I think having just some baseline data is important as we continue to monitor what we're putting in front of our kids. So, any other questions at all from the board? All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
So we're wondering if there's opportunity if the board would grace us with a 5-minute recess before we get into our human growth and development conversation, and then followed by OEA, which would be pretty comfortable, I think, for getting team refreshed and the board also refreshed really good.
We're so lively. We're so lively here. As you can see, we're
Do you want to close this by doing the board action on science and then take that break just to fully wrap this up?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So is there a motion to approve the science monitoring report as presented? Motion from Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Juan Carlos. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? It has been approved as presented. Thank you. And just to kind of, just the follow-up, I think the board would like to probably see just what the indicators could look like as we move forward and in alignment with maybe even that baseline data likewise for social studies, so we can see growth with new curriculum too.
Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic. Okay, if we could take a 5-minute recess, we will be back here at 7:22, I think.
Thank you, everybody. This one there.
Yeah. Well done. Click on the.
Not a single slide was split.
And we can pick back up with, I've got to pull my agenda back up. I take a recess and I've lost all control over everything. I have no idea where we are. And, but we do know about the WNBA draft, which really, in the scheme of things, wasn't wholly irrelevant. So that's, all right. With that, we can go on to superintendent report, picking back up with human growth and development updates.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're here to present our human growth and development update, and there will be followed with a couple of board questions. We just, in the event that the board decided to take action, we put them in board action for agenda purposes. It may be a situation where there's more of a directive that does not lead to action, and we understand that as well. But just in case, we put it there in that event. So I want to do two things, and ironically, with us being able to just have the social studies curriculum approval process, which was done through admin, and then the board approved the funding. This the human growth and development is completely opposite, where it is by statute purely driven by the Board of Education with the support of a ad hoc committee, which has very strict requirements of makeup and ratios of who make up that committee. And so we want to talk about the potential construction of that committee, and also just kind of get some background of why are we talking about this, and I'll begin with a why we're talking about this. And so we are in a situation where we know that human growth and development is a very crucial, important component of what is taught in education. We also know that due to differing opinions or family values or grade levels, that is important that we really engage our community, because the beliefs can move from household to household, and we want to be respectful and acknowledge of varying beliefs. We have over the course, I think it is magnified recently, where we have received information from both staff that are delivering curriculum, as well as parents and that are engaging with their students in the receipt of curriculum, knowing that it is time for us to take a deeper look at what we are putting in front of our students to ensure that it meets the parameters and the requirements of our Board of Education and thus our community, to ensure that if there are pieces that may be missing that we need to explore to add to our curriculum, that is available as well. And honestly, as things become more archaic, there's some opportunity to take some archaic pieces of material out. So the board can, through the committee ad hoc focus, can go to, I would call it 3 processes, and it may be a process where you go through all 3, but in a different timeline. First is a review of the curriculum. What do we have in front of us? Along that way, there may be some decisions to revise components, and then ultimately you may get to, and I say this probably years down the line, where you could look at a complete curriculum overhaul or review, and maybe the purchase of new curriculum. And so those are things that we just want to put in front of you, but it is so important that for us to present to our Board of Education and our community to hear us to talk about the statutes that guide this work. So everyone is transparent and clear about that. And then we will get to the specific questions around the who, the what, and the how of the execution of the committee work from there. Okay. All right. So thank you to Nate and soon to be, and I'm just going to segue here. We're going to send good vibes to Dr. Jackson. She is defending on Wednesday.
Oh,
all right.
Wow.
All right. And we are super confident that title will resonate here. So we're all good vibes from us, your school family, that we know you're going to do great. All right.
Thank you.
All right, team,
Yes.
ready?
Thank you for that, setting the table for that. And so I want to start with saying, thank you for growth and development. It comes off as, it has so many different emotions tied to it. And we, as a school, we recognize that parents are the primary educators on this. But it's a partnership with schools to make sure that we are getting that accurate medically sound information around human growth and development. And human growth and development isn't just, it encompasses so many things. It's a segue, a piece of our health education. But it includes anatomy, physiology, self-esteem, body image, communication, values, positive decision-making, relationships, sexual intimacy. So it has all of those components in it. But I also want to make sure that people understand it's just a piece of the health education. Currently in Verona, we do aspects of human growth and development in 4th and 5th grade, and that's usually led by our school nurses. And then in middle school, in 6th and 8th grade, it's in our FACE, family and consumer education classes. There are components that we talk about it. And then at the high school level, in grades 9 through 11, in the health classes. And so DPI and just best practice is human growth and development should be woven throughout from pre-K through 12 at development with appropriate curriculum in front of students throughout. So it's not just this one quick unit at 4th grade or at 5th grade, but that it's throughout the curriculum in K-12, pre-K-12.
So with that, I do want to reiterate that this is a unique curriculum that the board has like broad control over in comparison to other curriculum. And on this slide here, we have some recommendations that the legislature has in terms of teaching this curriculum. As you can see, these recommendations are pretty wide-ranging. They range from communication about sexuality, reproductive anatomy, benefits of abstinence, impacts of drugs on decision-making, adoption, prenatal care, STIs, marriage, escaping violent relationships, stereotypes, and bullying. And also, as you can also see, some of these are highlighted. They are highlighted because if we do any of these items, there's a whole list of items that we must do. And I believe Tracy started to mention some of the things that we're already doing in schools. That means that we have to do the things that are coming on the subsequent slide. So if we do any of those highlighted items on the previous slide, we have to do all of these. We have to teach abstinence as the preferred method for unmarried pupils. We have to talk about the socioeconomic benefits of marriage and parental responsibility. Talk about the whole pregnancy process, including childbirth. We have to teach about criminal penalties for sex acts of minors, including the sex offender registration requirements. We have to teach about HPV, HIV, AIDS, and relinquishing newborns to EMS workers, kind of like leaving your child at the fire station.
So quickly, I just want to pause for the purposes of our community that if they're listening currently live, I guess this will be one of our higher view YouTube, and rightfully so. That when you see this list, you may look at your own household and like, wait a minute, this my child is in kindergarten, my child is in first grade, second grade. All of this list are purely through the lens of appropriate developmental age, and making sure that just because this list here doesn't mean that you will get that information at the every year in every class. It's really around the design of appropriate age and maturity levels is the best way to put it. But in this slide, if you look at it in totality, it's like, okay, wait, and all of our parent hats probably come up for a second. Is when would actually my child be able to be discussing these topics? And that is, both the work of the group, but also our commitment to make sure that it is at the appropriate development age. So I just wanted to put a start pause there for everyone to hear us talk about that piece of it before we move to the next part of the slide.
I had one other thing I wanted just to highlight too, and I think you pointed something out, that this is unique in that the board has more of an active role in this type of curriculum, which is unusual for what we typically do. But it's also unusual that the state has such an active role in specifics about the curriculum. And so I think that's something that as people are maybe looking at the requirements, these are statutory requirements that we have to teach. It is not a choice that we make, even though we would be approving some recommendations that could come. I think it's that there's statutory requirements. So there is a little bit of a odd tension where we're talking about how parents are ultimately, the partners for teaching, and yet there's a heavy hand on what is required to be taught. And I don't know that that's really well understood out in the community, that this is such a unique curricular topic that it is really prescribed heavily by law.
Yes, but the school district as the experts are probably the best people to decide what's age appropriate.
Yes,
And then by
absolutely,
law, it
yeah.
does have to be medically accurate too. So
Yes.
there is the statute telling us to go one way, but there's some wiggle room in the statute.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments before I move on? Okay, so the ad hoc advisory committee that the statute requires you to establish, ad hoc meaning that they only really have to meet or work when you guys decide that they should do so. An advisory meaning that they serve at your pleasure. This committee is in charge of reviewing, drafting, and developing this curriculum. And as you can see, there are certain people that must be on this committee. Parents, teachers, administrators, pupils, healthcare professionals, and clergy members. As you can also see, there's a specific ratio in terms of people on this committee, or ratio limits. So there's a 1/5 limit for each category besides parents. There's also a 1/4 limit for any Verona area school district associated person. So that includes like school board members, their spouses, employees, in terms of being on the committee. So if we go with the DPI recommended 15-person committee, that allows 3 Verona area school district associated individuals to serve on the committee. DPI also recommends that we pick an odd number, a number that's not too large in order to make sure that things actually get done. We got some clarification from DPI that says people that hold dual identities. So for example, a nurse who's also a Verona area school district parent could pretty much choose which capacity they want to serve in for the duration of the committee. Again, an emphasis on this process being like really public facing because this is a curriculum that's really close to home for some families. So these meetings by the ad hoc advisory committee are subject to open meeting requirements. Continuing on, some more notes from DPI. DPI also recommends that we revisit this curriculum every 3 years in order to keep it current. But they also gave us some wiggle room in terms of pushing forward this curriculum and development. They gave us some examples in terms of establishing facilitators to go along with the committee. These facilitators could be Verona area school district staff. They wouldn't be like official members of the committee, but they'd be helpful in terms of pushing the committee agenda along, especially if we have committee members that aren't really used to serving on like that small government style committee. There's also another suggestion that's done by a different school district, the suburban school district in Milwaukee, where they kind of have 2 different committees. They have an internally facing committee that includes school staff and healthcare professionals and whoever else. And that committee focuses on like creating like hard curriculum product, like the lesson plans, the unit plans, the scope and sequence, etc. And that group would work in tandem with the external facing committee, which would be this ad hoc advisory committee that we're asking you to take action on. So in terms of next steps, we're really just looking for some guidance from the board, or you guys can direct us to go and create a proposal and answer some of these questions at a later date. We're looking for you to decide what you want the committee to look like in terms of structure and focus. We already have an administrative rule that allows Dr. Clarity to appoint members to this board, but we need some guidance in terms of the size and composition and selection criteria for people on this board. We'd also like some guidance on what you want the board to focus on, or the committee to focus on. You can have the committee focus on just reviewing the curriculum and making tweaks here and there, or you can have them just start from scratch and create a whole new curriculum. And again, you can also request that we make these decisions and come to you with a proposal for you to approve later on. So with that, are there any questions? I know that was a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
So I just want to, before we turn it over to the board, I just want to go back one slide to the ad hoc committee. And I don't, well, the language that says DPI recommended is purely that, especially in the scope of size. And I think there is enough evidence to support that we will not have trouble having recommendations to join the committee. In speaking to DPI around the rationale with the number, they did mention that some communities have been trouble even getting to that point. So I think I don't want to get so confined. Just remember that every time the number moves, the ratio moves as well, as far as the number, or not the ratio, but the ratio stays the same, but the number is impacted by the number, by how the ratio is implemented at that time.
Unless it's parents.
Correct.
Right, so that's where, I think when I'm looking at this, and I don't know, I feel like this is a lot of moving pieces. Just in general, though, this is one of those topics where I feel like there's going to be a lot of interest in the community about what's being taught. And so I'm looking kind of at the end of result of anything, it's going to be coming back to the board for a recommendation. And I think from the board's perspective, or at least from my perspective as a board member, I want to make sure that we have ensured the voice of the community was influencing the committee work and that there was enough representation. So the fact that parents can make up more, that there's no limit on parents, I think is helpful. That's kind of, I want to make sure that when we have a recommendation, we are ensuring that there's a broad representation of our community members.
Right. Just brought all the different perspectives.
Yeah.
The conservative, the not conservative, the middle.
And without limiting who's teaching this.
Right.
Those voices need to be part of the decision making. The model that you're talking about, kind of an internal and an external, I think makes sense if there's changes to curriculum, new curriculum adoption, reviewing curriculum, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I think that hard curricular decisions can be brought into the ad hoc committee from the professional educators to be evaluated. But I really want to be sure that our community has, I don't know, John, you have a look that seems to say you have something on your mind.
I have a lot on my mind. I think this is exactly the type of messiness when government gets so big as to intrude on the personal matters of people and local officials, which I'm not a fan of. I agree that, not only are we bound by statute, but we have an obligation, a moral obligation to seek out the most representative views of our community as it pertains to this. The statute is horribly written and gives us an absolute mess to deal with in terms of how to do it, because it doesn't really give us any local say. It's a law set from in a different place at a different time at this point by different people. So that's I think just me bloviating a little bit. I'm not sure how the best way to do all this. I welcome some discussion about it. I think that this type of committee, like a 15-person committee that seeks to represent all the viewpoints and different backgrounds in our community, is a really good thing. I think that it's an advisory committee, and we need to, just like we talked about with social studies and your questions about math, there's a difference between choosing curriculum and implementing it. And the nature of this committee is that it's people that have ideas about choosing things and not necessarily comprised of people that are going to have to implement them. And so just logistically, that's problematic. I think we need to be aware of that. But yeah, I'm going to be done talking. Maybe don't ask me for a while. I'm just going to complain about this.
I have some thoughts on one aspect of this, which is I think that I understand we have this administrative rule that says the superintendent can appoint this committee, but I have concerns about that from a compliance standpoint. That might have been okay I think, and this is before my time on the board, but I think these were like legacy board policies, where it was like the board approved that authority to the superintendent. But the statute says pretty clearly that the board has to appoint the advisory committee. And I'm totally comfortable giving Dr. Clarity some guidelines for who to come back to us with a recommendation for. But I think ultimately it has to be us that approves who this committee was. And I think it's also important to recognize that this, again, by statute, this is an advisory committee to the board, which is different from some of our other advisory committees. They're there, this committee is there to advise us, not to advise the administration. And I think we have to recognize that. That said, I'm not trying to suggest that we need to be the ones like doing the work of finding candidates. Like, I think we can delegate that to admin, but I think we ultimately need to be the ones to approve whatever committee it is.
Joe, you kind of hit on something that I think is important. If it's an advisory committee to the board, what will the board need from the committee to trust its recommendation? What makeup would that committee have where the board can get a recommendation and feel confident? For example, do we feel like a 15-person committee would provide enough representation where we feel like when we have all of these different, healthcare, clergy, teachers, administrators, parents, it's a lot of people to put into a group and feel like we're getting good representation. So maybe, this is me personally, I would feel more comfortable with a larger group that has maybe more parent representation, as long as we have the key implementers voice, the key,
I'm stuck on them, so yes.
Well, good. I'm like, I can't figure out.
Yeah.
But that's where.
Yeah. And I actually have a question about the math, just in terms of the phrasing, so maybe Nate or whomever can help me with that. So I'm seeing, like on the ad hoc committee slide, there's a delineation that there must be parents, teachers, administrators, but then in the next piece it says no more than 1/4 can be employees. So even though teachers and administrators are listed separately and presumably a board member maybe, I don't know, we have to talk about that too, but then they're globbed together for the 1/4. Am I hearing that correctly? So they can be each 1/5 in separate category, but anyone who's employed by the district can only be a quarter or less of the total.
Yes, anyone that's employed by the district, including people that are like closely associated. So in theory, you guys could be on the committee as well, or your spouses could be, and that works into the 1/4 cap.
So my sense, just in the spirit of this part of the statute, is to ensure that parents have a voice, a larger voice, which makes me uncomfortable with having a staff count as parents. I think this is kind of bringing in more viewpoints. But I like the concept of having the internal and external group to ensure that the expertise of education is fully captured and represented. And then that work is kind of vetted through the ad hoc committee in a way. Does that model kind of hits the concerns that I have about who's selecting curriculum? Are they equipped to select what's going to be implemented versus who's ensuring values and viewpoints are represented?
And to that point, can this kind of move in phases? Because my understanding is it may be well worth review as a starting point. Because one, my understanding is, I've been on the board 3 years and we've never had this conversation. So we must be living in that 3-year land in some capacity. And because there is something currently happening in Dr. Clarity, what I think I heard you say is there's pockets of things that are being surfaced out of the curriculum we have right now. Right. So maybe it's worth investigating and just reviewing. And how flexible can our committee be on what the charge is? If it starts with review and then we realize, wow, can we kind of readjust and reframe what the intention of the work is, but start sort of at that ground level and adjust as we go?
Absolutely, you can change month to month what you want this committee to do.
What's the deadline? Is there a deadline for this to be completed by? No.
So there isn't a deadline, but we should get the ball moving on establishing this committee, because there is another administrative rule that
when parents bring concerns about curriculum, should they ever come, that we do have to consider reviewing that. And this would be the committee to do that.
So on the flip side of the minimum of 15, to your point, Nate, but we don't want to get so big that we become unworkable. Where do you see a top end, just so I can hear a number, and then I feel like we have a range to start to play with the ratios and the number of roles?
I don't want to put a top end on it, and I honestly don't want to minimize the fact that these are public meetings. And if we go through the process of having like an internal, external committee, and you can have as many educators that are working on the internal committee as you want, come to the meeting and make the recommendations there. So these statutory requirements are what they are, but we have pretty broad discretion in terms of working within those statutory requirements to kind of push this forward. I know that's not really a non-answer.
No, or just kind of to your point, Meredith, if we live in the idea of 15 to create a number of folks except parents, and then maybe leave the parent space a little bit more flexible to see some recommendations from administration.
Interesting.
And I'm literally just talking as I'm thinking because it helps me to share this out with all of you, so.
And I'm kind of just thinking of it too, but I think that I don't think we should get too hung up in the numbers. I think how I'm visualizing this is we communicate our expectations, and one of the expectations we've already said is a broad representation of the community at large.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, when it comes to the size of the committee, the larger the committee, the harder that is for the facilitators of the committee to try and do the committee's work.
Mm-hmm.
But so I don't want to dictate that to them. Can we say, like, we expect that you'll come back to us with a recommended slate for an advisory committee that meets this criteria, and kind of defer to Dr. Clarity and his team on what they think the right number is, that can meet those expectations that we set. Instead of us saying, we think it should be 18 people, go find us the best 18.
Right.
I think one of the goals that I think I would want would be to ensure that there's, parent involvement, and that's where not capping, but whatever number would be, whatever the group would come back would really be heavy with parent involvement. But I think, Nate, you keep saying that this is an open meeting, and I think that's a really important piece. And I think that's great to highlight because it's done, it's noticed, there's an agenda, the committee could have public comment, parents can come and watch, they can give their input. I mean, we can have a process where input from others outside of the committee can be filtered through the committee to the board. I don't want it to come to the board individually, but we can certainly have a way for other input to be given to the ad hoc committee by the public without it all hitting us. So the size may not be the biggest consideration when we have that open meeting element put in place. I think that'll be an interesting, it will be open and available for somebody who feels like they were overlooked as a committee member. They will be able to come and view. And if we have a place for their voice and their input to come in, that's not part of the actual committee, but still, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm kind of
those are great points, actually, to just how the process puts out, that it's not just in this closed door with this group of folks.
It's very transparent.
Yeah.
When was the last time this happened?
I feel like it happened like when I first got on the board.
Okay.
So it's been a while. So I think that it's been a while.
Was it contentious?
This has come up as, this has always been something of interest. And I don't remember, we've had some pockets of just curiosity. I mean, Tamara, do you remember? I mean, if it didn't happen last week, I'm kind of foggy on my looking back. It's been a while.
Well, I don't know if this is like okay to say, but
I don't remember.
being that these are going to be open discussions, I just think it's important that we are mindful that the varying viewpoints and individuals that are on this committee are very respectful of each other and of different views. Because that's something that families and children will be seeing if it's
Yeah.
And it's really important that we're mindful of who's on this committee and have respect for different viewpoints and then be comfortable with some friction and creative friction, whatever you want to call it, and have a discussion that gets us somewhere. That's all I was asking, was it like 6 years ago or whatever, because I just feel like things like this can be pretty
I don't feel like it's been,
ugly in different districts.
I don't think we have gone through this review process in this manner. I feel like the discussion about health has just kind of percolated every so often, but this review process feels very new to me. So I would hate to put a date on it.
Can I ask, and this is a question for Nate, because I'm looking at the statute right now. And where it lists out the composition of the committee, the different categories that shall comprise the committee, it's not really clear to me whether that means that you must have a representative of each of those categories. Has DPI advised on that?
So they want you to do your best effort to try to find someone from those areas.
From each one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, for example, when I first started looking at this, I was like, okay, so we want representation even with clergy, is that Baptist, Catholic, is the Muslim, so really thinking through all of it. And so you have to do your due diligence to try to find people to represent as much as you can. But there have been school districts that just don't have that makeup in their districts, and so.
Yeah, so if the clergy member joins and then for some reason they have to pull out, that doesn't mean all of the committee work has to stop. As long as we're showing our earnest efforts to comply with the statute, we're good.
Well, and I'd like to just add a piece of this, just again, to elevate that this is for statutory work. Yet, I think our board feels very comfortable taking a recommendation from leadership on membership due to the diligence that you and your team have shown in other areas where committees have been developed. So I want to lift that up, that we're not, I don't see myself defaulting to some of your recommendations because I just don't feel like doing this and I'd rather not think about it. It's because the groups that you bring conversations to us with, the groups we hear from, and other makeups of committees that exist in this district are done so thoughtfully. That is why I feel comfortable sitting here saying, yes, I think we can work in partnership and take recommendations from you and your team on who some of these committee members are and not feel that just pressure that we need to be doing more as a board in that piece. So thank you just for the setup that you all have done across this concept of committee work broadly.
But I think you've practiced just like putting together the parent advisory council and all these different groups. So these are groups that work well together with varying viewpoints.
Absolutely.
If we can do it there, we can do it short here.
The one other thought I have, and it probably doesn't need to be said because it's already embedded in the statute, but I'll say it anyway. One thing that's really important to me when I'm thinking of criteria for a committee is that it have significant involvement from healthcare professionals, given that, number one, that's the right thing to do, but number two, that the requirement in the statute that anything that's taught be medically accurate, I don't want lay people leading the charge on what's medically accurate and not. Correct. So.
Especially with the number of healthcare professionals who are also parents in our district, I don't think we would have any trouble with that. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the board wants to, well, my sense is the board doesn't want to sit here and be drawing names out of a hat. So we definitely don't want to do that. But I also don't want you to create a committee that then comes back to us and we're like, wait, we needed this, this, and this, and not have you have that information at the outset. So absolutely. It's, want to make sure that the board has set up our expectations up, our hopes are at the outset of this. So we don't have any surprises for you later. Like, you know what, we really needed to have 15 clergy people and that just isn't going to cut it now. So we don't need that many.
I would second Joe's concern. I would be, when we do get to the point where we're receiving recommendations, I really want to know it's been through a process to meet that criteria of medically accurate. And so to the extent that that's a level of expertise we can build into selecting our advisory board, we want all our curriculum to be scientifically backed and sound. And that would be really important to me in this one in particular.
Can I get clarification on one of the pieces? I thought I heard it, but I just want to make sure it was in totality. That because I think it'll be important as we communicate the potential of building a community of what their first call to action is. Did I hear the first call is review before?
That was something I shared and feel comfortable saying. I don't know how the rest.
I agree. I think you start getting into questions of design and curriculum before you've decided whether we need a new curriculum designed or what those needs even are. Okay. I think that's step one.
It seems like the process that we're using for the other curricular areas is a sound process and would also be acceptable under statute. So I would assume we could, if we're looking at what this committee does, maybe it follows that similar process for continuity in the district.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. So again, this is unique for me too. On this one, to have so much driven by the statute, and I just kind of leadership training. So what I heard is that myself and the team would be a team effort, provide recommendations of criteria for the committee and then potential membership in that order. And our communication to candidates would be that it would be a beginning of a review process of current curriculum that could go to revision at the board's directive, based off recommendations.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that sound? And I think somebody asked if this was a contentious process in the past, and I think, and I want to just circle it. I think Veronica was reminded us if it was. I think this has been a process that may have been contentious elsewhere. I don't feel like it'll be contentious in Verona. I think it'll be important because there'll be a lot of interest and people will want to participate, but I don't think the contentious aspect of this that has maybe been seen elsewhere in the state would be something that we have to worry about in Verona. But I do think parent involvement will be significant.
I think, oh, did you have something to say? What you just said. Yes, I was saying about the baseline, it would be important to know what areas we receive feedback from families as it currently stands, as part of that baseline. Because you had mentioned that whenever parents bring up points that have to be addressed and then has to kick off some kind of review, did I misunderstand that?
No, you understood it correctly.
Okay.
I believe it's Administrative Rule 411 that if people bring concerns about curriculum, the district has to assess whether.
So I'm assuming there's a list of concerns that have been brought up.
Or by doing the review, are we satisfying?
I guess what I'm asking for is, are we able to see the baseline plus any concerns that have been brought up to this point about the current curriculum? To take that into consideration.
Yeah, and it's some of them, like just parents choosing to opt out because while they, the importance of human growth and development, they think that some of our curriculum is a little bit dated. So it's that kind of thing that.
Okay.
And to be clear, parents can opt out at any time for
No
any
matter
reason.
what.
That's always, and you know, that's parental discretion. That is not a problem.
So I sort of feel like your summary a few moments ago almost would be a board action piece. Is that, I mean, if we have to take action to formally sort of set this into motion, I feel like aspects of what we are then saying next steps would be were kind of summarized a few moments ago.
Yeah, I feel like to your point, Jen, that if anyone challenged it, that we follow statute, the process of the board voting and taking action on the directives that I just articulated would show that
we
the board
approved up for our next step.
Correct.
Yeah. So repeat or, no, I mean, and I'm sort of jumping ahead, obviously maybe there's still more room for discussion, but just trying to get my handle on then what next steps do we need to take formally as board action tonight?
Yeah, and I do think formalizing something is just good practice. for the statute. But I want to make sure that there's any other input from the board that should be considered at this forming the committee process. Okay, so go ahead and repeat.
So our sense of the superintendent and administrative team will provide the board with the proposed selection criteria and proposal of committee makeup for the board's approval. That's for committee makeup. The actions of the committee at this point would be the review of current curriculum with the potential for revision based off recommendations and for the board approval.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. Is there anything else that the board feels?
I feel confident it would convey like the desire to stay towards the medically accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and some of the other things that have been lifted up here.
And that'd be the criteria that I would present back to the board.
Yeah, so we don't need to vote on that criteria. That is not something I feel like is relevant. You've heard our hopes and wishes, so
We
that
will have the opportunity to get that back in
Correct.
terms of a committee suggestion where we can revisit that criteria, ensure that it's been met.
Correct.
So are there last minute call for any questions? Otherwise we can move on to board vote. So is there a motion to accept the curriculum, the committee formation process as outlined by Dr. Clarity?
So
Motion from John. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jen. All in favor, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the committee formation process as outlined has been approved. Is there a motion to approve the original or the initial charge of the committee to be existing curriculum review?
So
Motion from Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe, I think. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that would be the initial charge of the board. If at any point the committee feels it needs to change direction, then that would come back to the board for additional action. But right now, it's strictly a curricular review.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for that. Okay.
It's fun when the state gets so involved in the curriculum. It's a
Absolutely.
good time.
you actually read the statute, it is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. But, I digress. I did not say that. It is ridiculously long. There we go. Okay, thank you, board. I think this,
Well done, Nate.
yeah, thank you, Nate. We appreciate you diving into this fun and enlightening topic.
His first duty he gets to do when he goes into development.
Yeah, I know.
Just, the fun just never stops. Okay,
All right. The next agenda, and hopefully my last, yes, is OE8 communicating with and support for the board monitoring report. I want to quickly do a review of adjustments to the policy based off of our workshop on December 4th of 2023. And then given that this is a 14 portion monitoring report, I'm just going to ask for questions on each of the sections instead of going 1 through 14. But I also thought it was important to highlight, and I want to thank Meredith and Jen for their facilitation and presentation at the board workshop on 12/4/23. At that time, we engaged in deep discussion that led to a full board vote to the additions of sub-policy 813, which reads the superintendent will ensure the board is appropriately included and effectively represented in district communications. We also, the board also then unanimously voted to add policy proposal 814. The superintendent will ensure the board has necessary staff and administrative support to successfully meet its government commitments and responsibilities. Those one reading was on 12/4, and then the second reading was the following board meeting, and it was voted into complete policy. I did have just a general question, because we did provide evidence for these when available. But something I failed to ask at that time was when there's a addition to a policy, when does that begin the cycle? And so we did add it because in one of the areas, most of the areas we were able to find evidence between 12/4 and the progress monitoring on date, but I don't know that the board will always continue to make adjustments, and I know with practice-wise if this is a case-by-case or.
I would say that my initial suggestion, and correct me if anyone else has a different thought, my initial thought would be just for this particular one, it's kind of from once it's approved, then the monitoring, you're not held accountable for what we hadn't approved prior to that. So before the approval date, I mean, the whole purpose of our OEs and our results is to set out so there's no surprises. And so that would be unfair to be monitoring something that couldn't be known. And then there may be something that comes up in the future that once we approve, there's still a period of time where it can't be implemented yet. I think so it's case by case. I think there's a little bit of flexibility.
Absolutely. So, in monitoring and for the purposes of just a monitoring report and just so it was documented when the board does my evaluation process in December of next year, I did mark an area that I marked as an area for growth. Ironically, it relates to the very presentation that we did where there was a potential with the timing of when I allowed communication to go out, the board not having this presentation in advance, that if a community member or someone asked about the process, they wouldn't have left the board in the best situation to talk exactly about the statute in a full presentation manner. So timing wise, just knowledge and growth, that make sure that presentation goes first, and then there's any type of, even if we know that we'll get there, we just needed to flip that process to make sure that a board member was never caught in a situation where they didn't have enough information about where we were moving and the why. So we just wanted to acknowledge that in that situation, and obviously a commitment from myself and the team to ensure the proper order of operations moving into the next cycle. So, and also I appreciate I think our structure came to light where you're able, where I am held accountable based off feedback, and so that allowed for the proper placement of the presentation that the board received today. So thank you for that as well. With that, hopefully you don't desire that I read 14 sections to you, and then if there are areas that you had either questions about the evidence itself or the way that I marked it, I am happy to answer those, but then I'll turn it over to you for that, sir.
No, I'd like you to read all 14. Maybe I think the best way for the board, if we can start just at 8.1 and just kind of scroll through, and as things pop up, we can ask questions as we go. I mean, I think a lot of this, most of this will not come as a surprise because we've been living this. So it's just a good opportunity to ask any questions, clarify anything that's coming up. So 8.1, are there any questions or comments here? Okay, 8.2.
Should I answer? No.
It's always nice to have just.
Oh, right.
I mean, you can speak on behalf of everybody. I like that. I like knowing we can move forward. 8.3.
Mine feels very thorough.
And so much of this, to your point, Meredith, we are doing ongoing, kind of the depth of this by reaching in and adding 8.13 and 8.14. So just again, so the community understands that these are pieces and some is carryover, from evidence from last time. So we're similar, right?
8.4.
I think this is a good one to just
read for a second in light of our ad hoc committee discussion?
Mm-hmm. This would be one where I have a question, and actually kind of a question for the board and for Dr. Clarity. When I'm reading this, information from a variety of internal and external viewpoints are used to inform the board during decision-making processes, as demonstrated through Board of Education reports and presentations. Is the board expectation that we are receiving firsthand that information, or first are we receiving it through admin? This is one that I've gone back and forth with, because I would say, like staff advisory meetings, we hear information from staff, pretty regularly coming to, Board of Education meetings. But like the special education parents, advisory, we don't hear from that except through admin. And I'm not sure that I'm just curious if we have what does this, I'm just pulling it out as
I guess to me, what this says is the superintendent's presentation to us reflects that variety of opinions, internal and external. Not necessarily that Dr. Clarity needs to be responsible for bringing us primary source information from internal and external sources.
Yeah. It was a question that I've had, so.
It's a good question.
Yeah. Any other questions here? 8.5.
It's anticipating significant.
I know, and being responsive enough in a way that's humanly possible, so I think, right, given all of those.
Is there a press person here? No.
Yeah, and I feel like we get so much great information on a regular basis. That's really, really wonderful. Okay, 8.6. 8.7. If I'm going too fast, or if I'm going too slow. 8.8. I will say, I appreciate the work that you put into the leadership letters, and I also appreciate how that has kind of morphed and changed as needs have presented. I think it's been, I appreciate the responsiveness to your changing time, the board's changing needs, and just, it's been, I think, really effective how the leadership letters have kind of moved into a different format.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I agree.
And I want to share that also with Marcy. Marcy's been very, very flexible and has been very patient with the fluidity of some things that go on in my head. So, so I think, thank you.
Okay, 8.9. Yeah. 8.10.
8.10, again, this was, I put it yellow because of my self-report on the area. I didn't know if it went red because of one incident, so it's like
it's so hard.
Slow. It was like, so yellow it really just slow down. And,
Well, I think it's a good, it's just a good reminder that things are going to come up.
Yeah.
And, I think I appreciate the flexibility with how this was shifted so that the board could get caught up and that questions were answered. And I think just it's things will happen, and it's with the response to them that's been helpful. All right, 8.11. 8.12.
Also good.
8.13. Yep. And thank you for the ongoing meeting recaps.
Summaries,
Yes. And I'm assuming that Dr. Clary's not the one slaving over the computer, so thank you, Marcy, for doing that. We really appreciate that.
We're gathering data on number of clicks, number of reads.
And just again, on 14.2 capacity building, and I be very clear, hopefully, it's not capacity building because of Lori's
No, no, right.
ability. Yes,
Right.
we haven't completed her evaluation for this year, so I don't have that documentation. Right.
Lori, we think you're doing great. Thank you for all that you do to keep us moving along. Okay, any other questions with OE8?
We have time. Can I make just a quick comment? I think we talked about this a little bit in the workshop. I think there are some areas in this framework that we have with indicators and evidence that are really useful, and some areas where it's kind of created work for work's sake. And I review this report, which is so thorough. It reads to me like it must have taken a long time to prepare. And on this OE in particular, I don't need any evidence. I lived it. You know what I mean? Like I'm the evidence. Like my own assessment as I read each OE of like, do I feel like Dr. Clarity did this? Yes. Okay. Check. I feel like this one in particular can be made more efficient, in my opinion. That's only to save the amount of labor hours it took to compile a really thorough report.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say bless you on a public meeting, but it does. But yeah, maybe this will be for discussion on what is a level that both is efficient for our team and it still meets the criteria of our.
I kind of would lean towards Joe. I do like sometimes here's a couple examples just so I get into the mindset, like i.e. this thing. But when you have so much linked, I feel like that really is just a lot of work.
Especially because we are so interweaved with this that even the bullet point list without needing the links, because we know what those are. Just in looking at 8.13 in particular, it's super useful, I think, for the community perhaps, but in terms of our own internal measuring and.
In my opinion, this actually goes even a little bit further, and I know it's embedded in our governing framework that I don't think we can move away. I don't even need the indicators. I just I feel like I'm the indicator, like my own thoughts on it are the indicator. I can just read the OE and say, the superintendent will provide the board with X, Y, Z, and I'll be like, yeah, I think he did, check. That's specific to this OE itself, but I don't expect we'll make that level of change to the framework.
Which is an important point about what this OE is, because it's the influence of this group of folks sitting here, so we are actively part of that all the time. Versus some of the amazing finance documents that get linked that I don't see every day, so yeah.
I feel like we talked about this in our workshops. This OE is unique in that, like, it puts the way that these are all phrased. Like the board is doing we're the evidence, like Joe said, and that's different than all of the other ones. So each of these bits of evidence, it's, I don't know, I keep going back to we should just we're the ones that just check this off. Certifying to the community that from our perspective, we're getting what we need to do our jobs from the administrative team. Dr. Clarity in particular. So, yeah. Asking Dr. Clarity to provide all of this evidence so that we can then say, yes, we're getting what we need to do our job. It's work for work's sake and not.
I would agree with that. This does how would you like to move forward with that?
We'll take an example of what an OE8 looks like, and make sure that it fits the needs, and then do that now rather than get to the the monitoring report next year.
Oh, sure. And we'll be like, where's all the information? How are we supposed to remember any of this stuff?
It won't take me long. Just kind of give an example of what it could look like.
Yeah. I just feel like
I just wonder how much this is closely related to the superintendent evaluation. Tied into that. I'm good with it
That's
all.
interesting.
Ready to vote, so.
Yeah, ready to vote, okay. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, motion to accept OE8 as presented. Motion from John, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe, all in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? OE8 is accepted as presented. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we are finished with, I'm in a different meeting here. We are finished with the superintendent's report. If
I have a quick question. Do you need any additional information from myself or Chad in regards to board action A?
If we head over to that, yeah, Chad, would you just give like a 30-second update on what we're approving with the
Yeah. So 6603 agreements are happen when school districts cooperate in a number of different ways. One, at some point this spring, we'll have the board sign off on a purchasing cooperative that happens to source our food locally. And we cooperate with other school districts to do so. In this case, this is for 4K programming, where we share students across district borders with Madison schools, which then also means that there's essentially horse trading that goes on back and forth in terms of resources. There may be years we get more students from MMSD that attend our 4K programming or vice versa. And this agreement is in place between both school boards that we have certain operating rules in terms of the resources that are passed back and forth, and we agree to cooperate with each other. That's essentially what it is in a nutshell. Madison's voting on the very same thing tonight, and this has been a long-standing agreement between both school districts. It's been very productive.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep.
So with that, is there a motion to approve the intergovernmental cooperative agreement with MMSD regarding 4K programs?
So moved.
Motion, was that Joe?
Yep.
Motion from Joe, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jen, all in favor, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion to approve has been approved. The motion to approve the intergovernmental cooperative agreement has been approved. Okay, so we have already gone through the rest of board action.
Except there is, Corby, you want to share your update for just OE8 general, right, board updates?
Do you have any updates?
Oh, yes. I've been asked to speak at the UN UNESCO conference in Paris about our strategic framework.
Wow.
How we put it together, its inception, and its impact on the district.
Wow.
Do you need someone to carry your luggage?
I know.
How many tickets?
That's exciting.
That's great.
That is very exciting. When is it?
May 3rd.
It's like right away. It's amazing.
That's
I know.
very cool.
How
Congratulations.
did that, when I just asked how that even came to be, I mean, I don't know anybody in the UN or Paris or anything. How did this even happen?
So they heard about our framework from several other educators in the UN. I'm not sure how. So they reached out.
Probably Sydney.
Sydney.
Sydney Moore.
Oh, okay.
Who was on our student advisor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. That would make sense.
Sydney Moore is on the student advisory that created the.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well, we'll be excited to hear a report when you get back as well. So that's a great update. And then we'd like a update on the update. So who can top that? Just out of curiosity. Any other updates?
I got that.
Okay, public comment, no public here. We can move into superintendent consent agenda. Has everyone had the chance to take a look at the items under the superintendent consent agenda? Are there any questions? Any concerns? Hearing none, superintendent consent agenda is approved. Take a look at board consent agenda. Any questions on the board presented? board consent agenda. There's several items under there. No questions? I really do like feedback if you want. All in favor? With no questions, the board consent agenda is approved as presented. Future agenda items, our next regular meeting will be May 6th and then May 20th. We also have the graduation ceremony on there for June 8th, and that's at Epic this year. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion from John, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Corby, all in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Admin team, can I have you for 2 minutes? Stage left or stage right, whichever one you choose.
I give you.
So,